warm welcome to all our panelists for the second session. And very happy to have Vijai Dharmamony here chairing the session. We're going to explore CSR funding for research. Vijay, I'll hand over to you because I realize we're running a little bit short of time, but please go ahead. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you so much, Savita. So, hi everyone. It's a pleasure and privilege to join this discussion. So thanks much to the panelists and the audience today for joining us today. So I'm going to introduce the panelists in a moment. Before that, I would like to set the stage and talk briefly about this today's topic. So to give a background on this CSR, CSR stands for Corporate Social Responsibility. So this mandatory CSR provision is applicable to the larger companies in India where they have to spend at least 2% of their profit towards any social cause listed under Schedule 7. So what is Schedule 7? The Schedule 7, it's a list government created. So it lists a few activities which are legally qualified for spending this CSR funds. So the good news is research is an eligible activity under this Schedule 7. So let's discuss more on the challenges and opportunities around this CSR spend, particularly towards research in India. So today we have eminent panel members, starting with Dr. Satyajit Meyer. So Dr. Meyer serves as the director of the National Center for Biological Sciences, Bangalore. He is the former director of the Institute for Stem Cell Biology and Regenerative Medicine at Bangalore. In 2012, Dr. Meyer won the Infosys Prize for Life Sciences for his study of regulated cell surface organization and membrane dynamics. Personally, I had the privilege of learning a bit of fundraising and private fund management while I was in NCBS. Welcome, Dr. Meyer. So next, I will introduce Dr. Sapna Poti. So Dr. Poti is the Director, Strategic Alliances in the Principal Scientific Advisors Office, Government of India. Her primary role is to promote scientific R&D and innovations for social impact and to address industry problems through industry, foundations, and government channels. Dr. Poti is a PhD from IIT Madras and has around 26 years of experience in industry, consulting, and government. Her previous stints were with Indian Institute of Corporate Affairs, Tata Trust, and National Skill Development Corporation in the social development and government sector. Dr. Poti also has industry and consulting experience with ITC, Hewitt Associates, Deloitte, Toyota Kirloskar, Tatas, and Crompton Greaves. Welcome, Dr. Sapna Poti.
Thank you.
Next, we have Mr. Eshwara Venkatesam. Mr. Venkat is Pro Vice Chancellor, Development Placements and Alumni Relations at Ashoka University. He has been with Ashoka since its inception and works closely with its founders, Board of Trustees, and governing body. Mr. Venkat's responsibilities include fundraising, developing and implementing strategy, providing leadership, placements, and heading alumni relations at Ashoka University. He formed and led the team that has raised the largest collective philanthropic fundraise in India. Prior to joining Ashoka, he spent 21 years in building and growing startups in financial services and related sectors. His core strengths lie in building, growing, and managing geographically diverse operations. Welcome, Mr. Venkat.
Thank you. Hi, Jitu.
So I would like to start with Sapna. Hi, Sapna. So you and your office, PSA's office, have been involved in promoting R&D, landscape in India, especially encouraging industry collaborations with premier research organizations and academic institutions. Also facilitating CSR grants to these organizations. In fact, I'm sure that your PSA's office has played a significant role in bringing in the research component under Schedule 7. So, but if you see the statistics, recent years, although a lot of CSR funds are spent towards social cause by companies, the share towards research is very minimum. And the last financial year, more than 20,000 crore has been spent towards the CSR cause. But towards research, I don't know, maybe few crores. So do you think any improvement towards this share in the coming years?
Right. Thank you. Just to make it clear, institutes have their own CSR wings, and they are the ones who actually reach out to the industries. On top of that, the Office of PSA plays a role of getting collaborators. So R&D is not the only area that we work on when it comes to funding. It also includes startups, innovations, and the entire value chain. So R&D is one very small component of what we do. Secondly, I think comparing apples to oranges is not a great idea, because R&D as such is a very complex topic within the CSR Schedule 7. If you see the 17 points which are listed there, most of them are very straitjacketed. And especially when it comes to affordable housing or poverty elevation or skill development, etc., those impacts can be showcased in a yearly basis, in a short term and so on, and people do understand that. Secondly, industries also look for instant gratification. They look for branding, and they also look for something which is tangible. Very few visionaries or strategic leaders actually understand R&D. And the fact that R&D, maybe 80-90% of the R&D can even fail, right? So it's not necessary that R&D will always, it's like I said, it's not so simple as, people think it is. So the whole idea of, first of all, adding R&D to the CSR itself is a good move. And I think, so if there are few crores that you're mentioning, which has gone into R&D, that's an amazing outcome. Second thing is that countries like Korea, etc., didn't even have to put a CSR over there. Industries always funded R&D in academia, and they jointly partnered and so on. So we are not gunning only for CSR funds. We are also looking at industry problem statements, industry funding, and all of that as well. So it needs to be looked at holistically. I'm sure you have more questions, so I think I'll stop at that for the first one. You could, ask me other questions as well. Vijay, you're frozen. We can't hear you. Jitu, you have to unmute yourself.
Oh, yeah. Sorry. We can see two of you now, Vijay. Yeah.
I think Vijay is back.
Yeah.
Oh.
So Vijay, I don't know if the answer was so bad that he's actually disappeared.
He got shell-shocked, Sapna.
Maybe there's some technical glitch, but
yeah.
Yeah, sorry, my internet has some.
So we can hear you, Vijay. Please carry on.
Oh, okay, sorry. Please go ahead. Please go ahead.
No, so I've responded to you.
Okay. Thanks, Sapna. Sorry, I missed the last one. Anyway, so I'll follow up on that. Like most of the R&Ds you mentioned will fail. Actually, that was part of one of my later question, but I will add on to that here. Recently, this impact assessment is also being a criteria for these CSR projects. Government is now increasingly scrutinizing these CSR projects because all companies are not good shapes. They are skipping spending CSR funds or manipulating the way they spend. So increasingly, government is monitoring how the companies are spending CSR funds. So if you see the MCA website, they have a format, the template where these companies has to fill how they spend their project and how they measure the outcomes, the results. Mostly these are time bounded. And the CSR projects usually run 1 year, 2 year, or maximum 3 years, I think. So for R&D projects, most of the times these may not be applicable for two reasons. One, you already mentioned, some of the R&D projects may be bound to fail, or we don't know. Measurable outcomes may come in this short timeline. The second thing, in Indian research landscape, if you see, post-evaluation of research projects is not usually a practice. right? This impact assessment after a project is done. So how far this is practicable in Indian research landscape? If Jitu can comment on that.
Yeah, no, so I think, I mean, you raised 2 points, Vijay. One is the aspect of spending from a company's perspective, and two, the idea of impact assessment. Now, from a company's perspective, I think Sapna sort of indicated that there needs to be, to engage with R&D, if we are talking about research and development, you need to have, more than, a branding or more than a sort of an attitude to the funds coming for R&D with the intention of a long-term perspective. Now, moment you say that that's the frame of how CSR from a company can engage with R&D, I think the impact assessments have to be framed in those terms as well, right? And I would somewhat disagree with you when you say that there is no impact assessment of R&D. I think the impact assessment of R&D is in some ways within the R&D space. I mean, there is the idea of the peer measures of impact assessment, the idea that that the research has, if you think about research which is related to translation or development, that it has a translational outcome. So these are all measurable aspects of research and development which are continuously taking place in the research ecosystem. So I think CSR spending may need to in some ways march in step with these metrics that are already there, and perhaps even refine them or hone them or modify them, so that one can have a more harmonious engagement between the funding and what is an ongoing activity. I think it would not be correct to say that CSR spending should guide R&D, of course, because then what is the point of R&D? You already want you already know what the outcome is, right? And you're just trying to fuel it, which I think is going to be a dangerous relationship. But I think having these CSR activities generate calls or come under some one umbrella where calls are generated for specific requirements, say both either at the national or in identifiable programmatic ways, and CSR contributes to that. I mean, that's a very nice way, and I think Sapna, again, when you were perhaps not listening, Sapna brought that out. So it would be worth discussing some of these models. I'll stop there. Yeah.
Just to close that point of discussion. So Sapna, you have been facilitating and playing a license role in these CSR grants to many of these premier organizations. So this time-conscious aspect, this impact assessment aspect, did it create any conflict anywhere, or so far it has been going on smoothly from the corporate side, this impact assessment aspect of these projects?
Right. So I think we've had good as well as bad news, and luckily we have more good news than bad news. And so the academia space has always been different from the industry space because of the nature of work that both have. One is more, to do with fundamental research and so on, and the other one is, of course, to do with applied research and go to market and all of that. So depending on what you are actually targeting, your pace would be as per that. But the good news is that both of the animals are now understanding each other, and they are trying to work with each other. And I think the achievement that they have, kind of the outcome that they have been able to come with is what, has brought them to now go to the next level. So most of our projects, in fact, there is no company that I can think of which has not come back to us. In fact, it's in auto mode now. Some of us are resting a lot because the companies are coming back and they're saying, okay, now give us more. So the fifth and sixth, and especially those companies which were very difficult to crack. So they were like, we don't need this, we don't need academia, we don't need startups, we're doing stuff on our own, we have our own foundation, we're doing very well, and all of that, So then now they are like, they are the ones who are actually coming after us and saying that, give us more projects, and are there some interesting projects that we can fund, and so on.
Okay, yeah, that's a good news, really. So moving on to Mr. Venkat. So I think here in the panel, I think you are interacting more with corporate leaders on a day-to-day basis, and you might be hearing a lot, their thought process on how they are, how they would like to spend their CSR money. So how would you, in your perspective, how you think how these corporate leaders want to spend their CSR fund? Not particularly on research. I'm asking in general the CSR spending. I think you're on mute, Mr. Venkat.
Yeah. No, thanks, Vijay, for your question. And Jitu, hi again. Last time you were on mute. So companies in India have an annual budget roughly around 30,000 crores. 25 to 30,000 crores are estimated to be the total quantum of CSR funds available in the country, right? And companies often tend to distribute these funds to their facilities or to the factories or help people around that region, right? Sometimes they also work with communities that impact them very closely. Like, for instance, the soft drink beverages companies, they tend to work on water issues because obviously soft drink companies are just bottling water, flavored water, but there's nothing else to it, right? So they want to be seen as being responsible, right? But there are a handful of organizations that are making big bets, and they're taking fairly innovative approaches to grant giving, right? Now, the thing that works very well with companies is they will fund projects which they can understand easily. Because think of them as people from the world of business and finance. If you go to a foreign bank or an Indian bank, they are not accustomed to science and research because that is not their natural language. So someone has to build that understanding with them, right? What do they understand easily? Because that's something that they're exposed to very normally. They're exposed to education, primary and secondary. They're exposed to hunger. They're exposed to malnutrition. They're exposed to environment and issues of that nature, right? Science doesn't cross the corporate path at all, and let alone the CSR folks who are, MBAs or people from that community in the companies, right? So the science industry on one side or the science institutions on one side want a certain kind of money, but the people on the other side who are granting those funds are not necessarily equipped with the knowledge of the sciences, right? So for the science world to receive grants means that there has to be a common language that is spoken between the two, right? And therefore, my suggestion is that you should look at maybe the science community has to look at the top 30, 40, or 50 even CSR grantors in the country, maybe 100, right? And talk to them about research and why the country needs research funding. That is important. When we started off at Ashoka, the CSR system has been in place for the last 7.5 years almost. When we started, raising funds, the question we received was, why should we give it to education? Why give to higher education? What's in it for us? How can we associate ourselves with the grant? How does the institution which is making the grant identify with the recipient on the other side? But these are real questions. And we have to address those questions. Now, how we address them is a matter of detail, but those questions are legitimate and we need to answer them. And Sapna mentioned earlier, there is a bit of branding involved. More than branding, I think it's a question of identity and association, right? And because at the end of the day, there are maybe 7, 8 businesses in a large company, their profits go into the CSR pool. Each of the business heads who's contributing to the profit is saying, you know what, my entire team has worked hard for 1 year and we've raised 50 crores of profit, and that profit is going to be given away by way of CSR, right? I want to have some say in that matter, right? So how do you facilitate that process? That's important. I'll pause here. I've thrown a few questions on the table.
Yeah, again, I think a follow-up on that as well.
Yeah,
maybe that also would be useful for this, because you said you're right, they are funding where they understand. Maybe that's the reason why health and education sector is getting more money.
Yeah.
But how to make them understand well? So you said we have to talk to them the way they understand. But which is the venue? I mean, this directly I'm coming to the point of how to approach these funds. So how the research entities, or how to approach? I know mostly the most successful method is if you have connections, networking. Through that, if you get a chance to explain, they may understand. Not by writing mails or cold calling. What is the better avenue for these implementing agencies to approach these companies?
So writing emails and cold calling doesn't help at all. I mean, at Ashoka, we've raised X amount of money to build an institution, right? And by the way, at Ashoka, even, and Jitu knows this, there is significant investments which are being made in the sciences going forward. We have to raise money, right? The way to do this is to literally go door to door to each one of these organizations. So I consider myself as a door-to-door salesperson. Fundraising is a sales job. Some people sell Pepsi and soap. Venkat sells education, higher education, and research, right? And maybe the science community needs as a forum, maybe people need to hire a person who's well equipped to represent the community, right? And build bridges with the key funders in the ecosystem. I think that's important, right? And that's something that I've seen work extremely well at Ashoka. So if you can find those bridges, and maybe it can come from the PSA, it can come from people like Jitu, it can come from other eminent people from the world of science and industry. But you need to have those, you need to have a group of 5-6 people who are equipped to represent the science community in India, talk intelligently with the grantors, and build that base over a longer period of time. That is critical. And by the way, I'll end over here, that this has to be seen as a long-term goal. You start now, you might start seeing fruits being harvested 3 years from now, 4 years from now, 5 years from now.
Okay.
It can't be a short-term vision.
Right. It takes time.
And I'll add one more point. Here's the thing, right? And I'm going to make it a little easy for the science community here. There are multiple elements to a science grant, right? You need hardware, you need a room, you need a building, right? Then you need chemicals, you need dry labs, you need wet labs, you need an animal house, right? And then you need chemicals all the time. Within these, there are some things which can be branded. A building can be branded, right? A laboratory can be branded, right? So if you have an annual budget, which is capital expenditure on one hand, and then revenue expenditure on the other hand, try and get funding at least for the capital expenditure. It takes a certain amount of cost out of the organization's book. So if you're a science organization and you have 2 columns of funding, one is the capital expenditure, the other is the revenue expenditure. The capital expenditure is easily monetizable, which is you can get a name, brand on the building, you can name a classroom, you can name a laboratory, you can name a building, and that will be helpful. At least some part of your expenditure is pulled out. Now, the difficult thing may be some chemical that you need to buy, or stuff like that.
Right. That's great. So adding to that, Sapna, you have been practically you have been involved in this process, right? Making these corporates understand these projects. So how you explain that experience? Is it easy to make them understand?
For about 30 years now, so for me, it's not a new experience. Selling science is new in the sense last 3 years I've been selling science. Otherwise, for 30 years I've been doing this for Deloitte and Hewitt and other big 4 consulting firms, where I was selling management consulting. So, like Venkat mentioned, a person who sells. I sell on a daily basis whatever I can, right? So, in terms of numbers, and I believe in outcome. I don't believe in activities and interventions, etc. So in terms of numbers, we did 1,800 crores last year, and this year, in the first 6 months, we've done 2,600 crores. I don't think this kind of money any of the institutes can manage on their own. So this is on an effort of just a 3 team member team in Office of PSA. And we have tried out everything. This includes chemicals, this includes equipment, it includes buildings. We have set up 14 centers of excellence across the nation on water, waste management, circular economy, renewable energy, name it. Okay, and during COVID, we've done enough and more on genome sequencing, BSL-3 labs. 2 labs rather, and then we did ventilators and so on. I can go on and on, but about 300 plus projects done by 1.5 member team in the first year, and second year with 3 member team. Today we have a IT platform called Manthan, which we launched on 15th of August, so that now nobody needs to wait for us, and we are not a bottleneck. If I'm not picking up a call, we don't need to be worried. So this is where all the stakeholders can come on the platform, work with each other, and there are about 3 or 4 large pillars there. The first pillar is the opportunities pillar, which is for the industries or for the global Indian foundations, etc., Wellcome Trust, and any of them who would like to actually engage and who would like to kind of showcase or share their opportunity with the entire ecosystem. And these opportunities could be funding opportunities. It could be, we call it an opportunity because it's an opportunity for the industry to actually offer something, right? So it could be a research problem statement. It could be pure funding for R&D. It could be innovation calls. It could also be equipments or, systems, or like, for instance, AWS provides computing space and so on. So anything of this sort can be launched on this platform, and it goes to all those who have shared their preferences. So there are people who have shared preferences of, say, biotechnology or water or waste management and so on. So people get these opportunities and expressions of interest, and they then apply and they get funded through this route. The second pillar is that we already have quite a lot of proposals which need support. So maybe top 3 have got immediate support, maybe the 5th or the 7th needs support. So we say, okay, why don't we showcase all of them against sustainable development goals? Because if you read the particular clause under Schedule 7, it says aligned to sustainable development goals, R&D as well as innovation or startup. So, just to make it easy for CSR folks who, may want to see that, okay, is it aligned to the SDG or not? We have actually showcased this in Pillar 2. All the proposals are there. You have R&D proposals. You could have centers of excellence proposals where you want support for COEs. You also could be a subject matter experts, and this goes for industry as well as international and Indian institutes. You can provide your journal papers as well as credentials, etc., on that subject matter expert section under each of the SDGs. Right. So tomorrow you could be, you want a jury, you want peer reviews for your proposals, you could do that. So that's the second pillar. The third and the most important is the exhibition of innovation pillar, or kind of discussions with the different academia. You could call for these innovations to be exhibited. So all these pillars are very clearly articulated, and there are sections of international engagements. We work with 10 countries, so you could see all the opportunities that those 10 countries have provided you. You could also look at school innovations, and then you have state government and central government. In fact, we have about 214 problem statements of the government, which the industries can actually address. So that's the kind of platform we have built. Again, crowdsourced the funding, not a single rupee that we got from the government. We have now housed it in the government, and then it's on NIC, etc. And now onwards, once this is the platform is matured, then the government will take charge of it. So that's the platform for you today.
Okay. So one follow-up question on this Mandhan platform. It's an excellent initiative, and I believe it's hosted within the PSA's website. Are you getting the visibility, the deserved visibility for that website? There's a question in the chat box also. I can read it out. Can all types of academic and research institutes avail opportunities on Mandhan? Private academic and research institutes also.
Right. So this is not on the portal of PSA. It is a separate URL, Manthan. And you could just type Manthan plus PSA and you will get it. And it's for grassroots innovators. It's for academia. Any researcher or innovator of this nation can come in, have register their logins, and then you can engage. We have also some criteria for eligibility in terms of the ranking of the proposal. So for instance, if an industry says that I'm fine with any kind of project related to water sensors, and it doesn't matter to me that is it a grassroots level innovator or is it incubated by one of the IITs or NITs, etc., then he can go and get whatever proposals he wants. However, there might be some industries who say that, okay, we are very interested only in quality proposals. And for them, quality means incubated by some of the premier institutes or credentials that are there or certifications, etc. Then there is an asterisk for those parameters and people can choose those proposals. And then there is a rating system of peer review as well as corporate rating. So proposals can be selected based on that as well.
It's valuable information.
And lastly, we are the 3-member team that I was talking about. We are doing daily workshops for various incubators, various institutes, 25,000 industries, and so on. So it's on a daily basis around 10 or 15 workshops. And like Venkat mentioned, I am a person who likes to have face-to-face discussions. So at least 7 to 10, when I'm visiting cities, at least 7 to 10 industries I personally meet and tell them about all that we are doing and so on. And that's how we have come to whatever level we have.
Thanks, Sapna. So I think regarding funding what corporate understands, COVID is a good example. During COVID time, corporates spend a lot of fund towards this cause. Maybe mainly towards buying PPE kits or masks or vaccine shots, but a fair share went to research, COVID-related research aspects also. But this is not the normal scenario. The research funding is very less from corporates. So maybe I'd like to ask this question to Jitu. So if you like to showcase as a research organization to consider research, what would be your opinion? Means to encourage corporates to consider research also while spending their CSR funds. You're on mute, Jitu.
Yeah. No. Thanks for that, Vijay. I think that's a really important challenge, and it's something that we should be thinking about given the experience of the last 2 or 3 years. In some ways, I think what Venkat has said, that breaking it down into bite-sized, consumables, if you will, is something that research structures like ours, whether it's government or private, should be doing. At the same time, when there is an unmet need that is felt by society or by the corporate sort of structures, there is an opportunity there for research to think about how it can solve those questions by engagement, right? So I think in both aspects, research needs to re-examine the modes of funding if it's going to avail of CSR, the modes of projection as well. But somehow I think this is going to require I feel require an organization that helps to do this. Currently, research in this country is very much geared towards government funding or funding from, say, foundations like the India Alliance or DST, DBT, and other government agencies, or some small private foundations, where you submit projects, right? But I think we have to, if institutions need to avail of this research, we need to submit fundable, bite-sized activities. And I think that's a new opportunity for the new set of grant managers, if you will, who should be thinking about this in a much more innovative way than they are now.
Convincing them is a task, I think.
Yeah, but I think we need people who understand how to mediate this interface.
Right.
And that's the challenge. I don't think scientists can do that. And so we need people who can do that effectively.
That is a separate set of professionals who can do that job.
Right. And, I mean, we have in front of us on the panel two, I think, of the most successful people who have done this. So we just need the scientists to just clone these guys. That's all.
True. So, Shivangat, following on that, the way forward for government institutions you just mentioned. So at Ashoka University, being a private university, also the public impression probably it's a rich university, because it has backup of HNIs in India. Also, you are successfully fundraising also. So having this background, the baggage of a rich university, what are your challenges? I'm sure you have your merits and demerits associated with all this networking and all. So
I'll clarify a couple of points. We are not rich at all. We haven't broken even after 12 years of operation. I don't know where we've given away in the last 12 years 418 crores by way of scholarships to over 4,000 students, right? Because we believe that on one hand, we need to build a top-notch institution in India, and the other hand, one has to provide that education accessible to people from all far corners of the country, right? So just to clarify, we're not wealthy, we don't have enough money, and that's the reason why we go raising money. If we had all the money in the world, we wouldn't need to go raise that. So we're not wealthy. What happens though is, because we are completely philanthropically built and we haven't taken a single rupee from the government, it necessarily means we have to go to wealthy people to ask for money, because it's only the wealthy people who have the money to give, right? So one has to go to them, and then one goes to companies with a CSR budget and say, please help us, right? So it's a daily sales operation. So I agree with what Sapna said, that every day you have to go open new doors, talk to people, engage with them, and try to get them to support you, right? And here's the odd thing, right? That in India, it's only in India that there is a demarcation between public universities and private universities. If you look at the US as an example, Harvard is a private university. Stanford, Columbia, Yale, Princeton, all of these are private universities. Harvard is owned by Harvard Inc. or Harvard LLC at the top, right? But nobody says, I'm going to a private university like Harvard. They just say, I go to Harvard, right? And it's actually good for the country that private capital is coming to help build academic capacity in India. And that is the selling that is required to be done. Similarly, it is important to go to corporate donors and say, hey, listen, India needs to advance in its science goals. And you need to support it, because if you don't support it, nobody else will do it. And that's the pitch that one needs to make. So I agree with what Jitu said, that if the science bodies can identify 5 or 10 people who can go raise this money or help raise resources, it will be immensely helpful. And I want to give you a few data points that will surprise all of us, right? And Harvard today has $51 billion in its endowments, 51 billion, right? Which is 3,90,000 crores. It's not a small sum of money. I was at Stanford in February 2019, and I'd gone to meet one of the fundraisers there to ask them how well they had performed in the year before that, right? So the American universities follow January to December, right? So, and I'd gone there saying, hey, listen, how did Stanford perform between January 2018 to December 2018? And the lady was saying, listen, man, the world is not in a happy place. Trump, Brexit, we didn't do well. So I said, no, but please quantify what not doing well means. She said that in a bad year, Stanford raised $1.2 billion, right? And a lot of money comes from its alumni and stuff like that. So if you look at so-called private colleges and universities, right? How it is 550 people raising money. Yale has a 10-story building with in New Haven, Connecticut, and Yale has a fundraising team of over 300 people. So these institutions have done well because they have put serious talent and resources behind that engine. That is to be recognized. And then, like Jitu said, right, break it into bite-sized parts, okay, and spin off each part and try and get funding around that. There will be some parts that you won't get funding for, and that's fine. That's where you need the DST, the DBT, you need the Wellcome Trust Alliance, the Jim Simons Foundation in New York, all of them, right?
Thanks. An interesting fact, since you mentioned Stanford, I am actually joining from Stanford University. I am actually visiting university. I am in university property now. Visiting for a different reason for my profession. Yeah, you're right. The facilities you see around is like immense.
Yeah.
So Jitu, following up on that, so in India, how how far in future you're going to depend on private funding, or currently, as you mentioned, it is mostly on government resources. So how the research landscape in general, I'm not particularly asking on TFR, but how far organizations can depend on private funding going ahead?
Well, I mean, I think we should ask the other question: how far can research funding in this country depend on government? Because I mean that's very steep downward slope as we see it today, and I think unless private funding steps up, we are going to be a research poor nation very, very quickly, and I think this is a call for arms that I'm raising, that if we don't look out for seeking significant funding for research, many of our research institutions are going to go, by the wayside, very quickly. So I think, I mean, there's both opportunity as well as, I should say, some amount of urgency for this to happen, and maybe CSR is one arm of that, but not the only one. And I think maybe all-out corporate support and all-out funding from private entities. For programs, grants, buildings, everything, should be built as a portfolio of possibilities.
If I may add, Jitu, to what you said, sorry for interrupting you.
Please, go ahead.
So I think to Jitu's point, he's actually right. All of the money needn't come through CSR, right? There are foundations, there's the government, and then there are companies through CSR, and then there are high net worth individuals in India who will support a particular area of interest, right? So therefore, then the team that you could create will identify who these particular donors are and go out and get across to them, right? And initially it may be hard, but it will take you to prove that this money is going to be well spent, and the fact that there's going to be some kind of outcome. And people know there's always failure. I mean, people who build businesses honestly have faced a significant amount of failure. So they deal with failure all the time, and they understand that. So I don't think they're worried about that, but I think really worried about the governance that goes behind the grant of that money. Sorry, Jitu, for interrupting you.
No, absolutely. No, I think you're glad. I mean, and as I don't want to repeat myself, but I think we need the right kind of people with the right kind of mindset to be interfacing this, crying need currently. So, there's a huge opportunity there, I would say, for this whole cadre of fundraisers and people who can bring funding into research. I mean, I don't think we can have a future as a country without research.
So just to add to that, especially to Venkat's point, we've got a whole repository which we have actually made from scratch past 2 years, which includes high net worth income folks, which includes organizations which garner high net worth income for for instance, like APVN and so on. And then you have Sattvas of the world, CSR box, and all these aggregators. So we've got the entire repository of those. We've got the repository of all those which are top CSR organizations. So we've done enough and more data analytics as well as build the repository, as I said, from scratch. And this is done by this 3-member team that I'm talking about. And all of them today are on Manthan. So, and we need to do workshops for each one of them. So the point is that collaborations and collaborators we have, in place now, right? All the research labs of BIRAC, of DBT, DST, all the institutes of repute, including private institutes, all of them. In fact, even Ashoka as well as others are also, invited and so on Manthan. All the IIMs as well, because there's a lot of humanities and social sciences involved in science as well. So we've got them as well in this whole thing. So the collaborators are all there. What we need to now focus is on quality of the proposals. We need to have the language that people understand, because many of the proposals, I myself find it difficult. A simple thing like breast cancer is written in such a convoluted manner that one thinks that maybe it's something to do with, non-science. It's so complex. So the language, and then we also rolled out workshops. We requested Deloitte, we requested IIT Madras to work together, because I worked in both these organizations and I come from IIT Madras. So it was easier for me. So I got them to actually have workshops for these scientists so that they understand what is pitching and how do they pitch and what kind of proposals, because proposals, or the DPR as they call it, is the most important. If you have the whole flow of thought and the clarity in how the R&D is going to be undertaken and in simple terms, the industry will understand that, okay, this is what this means, and this is how it's broken. And I would like to go for pillar 1. So for instance, many of the centers of excellence are funded by 6 or 7 organizations. IIT Palakkad Sanitation Center of Excellence is funded by HDFC Bank, Gates Foundation, Keystone, IRM Scientific, and so on. And similarly, IIT Dharwad, Renewable Energy, Honeywell, Infineon, Lois, etc. So there's absolutely no dearth of organizations which are funding our institutes. And we've got all of them excited. But the point is that now we can't get into every proposal and start making it simple and all that. They have to actually market themselves. Some of them are very good technologists, but they're not good marketers. And there are some who are very good in marketing and pathetic technologists, or scientists for that matter. So, that is the issues that we are facing today.
Right. If I may add to Sapna's point, we need grant writing proposal writing is a serious art and craft. We need people who can specialize in that. And I mean, if you leave it, and Sapna said it in a lighter vein, and I'm also saying it in a lighter vein, if you leave it to a scientist to write a proposal, it will sound like Isaac Newton is writing a proposal, right? It is very, very difficult. We are writing to a person who will write you a check. We have to explain to them in simpler language. And then again, I come back to grant writing that we do, and also what American institutions do, because they have mastered the art of fundraising. They have people who are professional grant writers. They have 20 people, sometimes 10 to 20 people who write proposals of high value grants, for high value grants. So I'm not saying we need 20 people today, but start with 2 people, 3 people, and you have to train them. You have to create a cadre of these people who will then educate the wider ecosystem. That's important.
Thanks. Thank you. So quickly, we ran out of time. I think we lot of suggestions came today, and sure these will be guidelines for all our audience. I would like to have some concluding remarks, like uh, like Indian government is taking solid steps, like legalizing this CSR, also by including research into it. But there should be, I'm talking about the due diligence process. Companies should also trust the implementing partners. There are instances where corporates chasing implementing partners as well. For example, especially with high funds like 5 crore or more, those kinds of funds. I know corporates chase people to take money because if they are confident on you, okay, you can only spend this much of huge amount, then they want you to take the money. So my question would be, going forward, what will be the win-win formula? I mean, the corporate should also get what they are looking for because they have to comply with the government regulations and all, especially the time constraints and other things. And the research entities, they should get what they want. Their priorities should also be taken care of. So from each maybe your perspective, since you are representing different class different, so how would you like to comment on that?
Yeah. So I think how I see it is that government is funding the equipment, the center of excellence, or the faculty members and all of that. Industry should be funding above that in terms of giving industry problems, giving CSR problems, R&D problems, and funding that particular problem statement. Right? If we are expecting that small piddly CSR funding, 20,000 crores for so many institutes and for so many startups, actually nothing. So if you are expecting that they're going to now spend that money on infrastructure, equipment, etc., that's absolutely ridiculous, because government has been funding continuously to most of these academic institutes and research labs. So the equipment is in place, the faculty members are being paid by the government, etc. But over and above, it should be utilized. There are quite a few centers which are not being utilized. So I think it should be industry problem related, and CSR also should give proper research problems like water, waste management, and things like that. Robotics for sewage cleaning, and all these we have, by the way, already completed these projects. So I think that's what it is. Second thing is that proposal making, as we mentioned, needs to be very, very crystal clear and in smaller slabs rather than giving a whole. I have proposals where it says in one line, requirement 520 crores. That's it. There is no line item. How are you spending it? What is the team structure? In how many years is this 520 crores and things like that. So I think this entire writing of the proposal and selling the proposal is what they have to do in a clear terms. And of course, like Jitu said, that there has to be support in that. Each institute should have a marketing wing, like every business unit also has a marketing wing.
Thank you, Sapna. So Jitu, would you like to add?
I think Sapna has really summed it up well. I just see that I feel that we should go also beyond CSR. Of course, the subject of the panel discussion was CSR and how do we engage CSR in a win-win formula between corporates and research entities. And we've heard a lot about that. But I think we should try and go beyond the CSR models to bring in serious private funding into research, where the value of research is recognized for the future. And we've spent the entire hour discussing various models and structures of how that can be put in place, and it's been really very valuable, for me to hear also from Venkat and Sapna about what are the possibilities ahead and what are the potential models that one can have. So I hope I'm looking forward to this happening, soon. But we should all be prepared for the long haul. This is not going to happen overnight.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So, Venkat?
Yeah. So I think Sapna has mentioned it very eloquently, and she's done a great job. And I spent a day at NCBS with Jitu. The thing that we need to do here is put a call to action. Because I mean, you can have a panel discussion, you can have a conversation, but the thing to do is to say, okay, we are going to hire a team of people, right? And we can discuss what the composition of the team could be. What will they eventually end up doing? Now, if you hire a team of people, it's going to cost you a bit of money. Who's going to underwrite that cost? And then what will the team do in terms of leveraging relationships that people in this ecosystem would have built, and then go raise the money, right? So I'm happy to get involved. I mean, if Jitu says and Sapna says, if you want to do a workshop, we can create like a workshop mechanism for a day to help people think through what needs to get done. And my sense is don't do this once a year because, and Sapna knows this and Jitu knows this, fundraising is a daily activity, right? You need to have refresher sessions every quarter even, right? That's the only way the engine will crank up.
Okay.
And I'm happy to help anyway. Yeah, so possible.
Take you up on that, Venkat.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, a collaboration built right there. Yeah, recorded.
Thank you.
Okay. So
Thanks.
yeah, a lot of take-home messages today. So yeah, thank you very much, Sapna, Jitu, and Venkat for all your valuable suggestions. So over to you, Savita.